My name is James Warren Reynolds, born in 1937. Right now I'm 85 years old. And I have a little brother, 2 years younger, Max J. Reynolds. And our dad was James Taylor Reynolds. And I was named after a cousin of my dad's by the name of Warren Munson's. And Della Reynolds is our mother. And she was from Junction, Utah, 7 miles to the north, and Circleville was where Dad and his three brothers grew up. Now, you're looking at an old river bridge that used to be right here to go over across into our uncle's property, and down this way was a garden and an orchard down through there. And as far as that alfalfa is down there, and over on the other side was the ranch. And 15 acres was up on this black hill up here. Now, the farm supposedly included 50 acres. 15 acres was this black hill. The other 35 acres was down there and was all irrigated out of a canal that runs behind the canal, the ranch house, and another canal over here. Now, the best crop, as I remember as a kid, that we could grow was rocks. It had to be, because every spring Dad would get the wagon and Max and I would get out there with pitchforks in our hands and go through the fields gathering rocks. But anyway, that's where we grew up for the first, 17 years that I was living here in Circleville. Now, I was born, my brother and I as I remember Mom and Dad tell us, we were born in an old hospital down in Richfield, which is 35 miles, 52 miles from here in Circleville. Now, the cabin was a log cabin of one big room with a little lean-to that went off the back, went up against the hill with the canal. And that canal had a little path that went up there, and a lot of times that's where we got our water. And we'd bathe in that, as well as the old river that run right down here. Now, Max and I, down at this end, there's a couple old Indian caves, and we used to dig in there, and we'd find old pottery and bones from the Indians that used to roam through this area all the time. Now, Circleville was known and named because this road here was on the south end, and the road that we come in on the north end, you couldn't see the roads within the valley of Circleville, and that's why it was called Circleville. Those mountains over there are called the East Mountains, and we'll get a picture a little later on of the West Mountains, where we used to hunt deer and antelope and coyotes, and the valley. When we were growing up, we'd fish in the river. In fact, one time right here at this river, we pulled enough big suckers out of the river to fill a big tub, and we'd eat some of those old suckers and a few chubs, and the rest would take down and feed to the pigs in Circleville. Now, in about 1941 or 40, I was 3 or 4 years old. we had a lot here in town, which is right here behind me. And Dad was going to build a new house for us. Now, he didn't have any money, so with his team of horses, which was named Doc and Madge, he would go up on the mountain, flip it over there, up there on the East Mountain to a sawmill, and he would haul in the timber for the sawmill, and in return, they would cut down the old dead trees and go in there and saw them into planks, which were about 5 or 6 inches wide and about 8, 9 inches tall, and whatever length that he could get out of the trees that he got. And those are the ones that after we had a little 2-bedroom or 2-room basement that was already been covered, he started to build us a house on top of that. And he took those big planks and stacked them on the top of each other with big spikes, nailed them. And then on the outside, they came in and put salt, black paper and chicken wire, and then stuccoed it all the way across. And then they painted it green. And on the inside, they plastered the wall with over chicken wire. And the old guy that lived just down the street from there was an old Bill Thomas, and he chewed a little bit of tobacco, and occasionally he'd make a spit and miss the floor and hit the wall. And as a kid, I can still hear him swearing as he had to come back and clean that off and recover it with the white plaster. Now the house now that is owned, 50, 60 years since we were there, when it was first built, it had, on the south side, they had a living room we walked right into with a little porch, concrete porch, and then a kitchen in the back, and on one side was stairs that went down into the 2-room basement. And then we had 2 bedrooms and a little bath on the back side. And Max and I slept in the one room and Mom and Dad in the other bedroom. Now, where this particular lot is located, Lane will show you right across the street where it's nice and green area. That was the high school. Where there's a building still located there. That building was the church, and it's now been acquired by people over the years and converted into a very large home. In this end was a seminary, and we used to come out of the high school right there, walk down there for an hour and go to seminary. And across the street where this big new building was the elementary school. Now, it seemed like my mother was sick a lot. The Circleville Cemetery. Here we are, the October of what year?
2022.
22. Anyway, here's my dad and here's my mother. And my mother died clear back in 84, and Dad was 202, so 8 years difference. And then here was my Dad's oldest brother, Uncle Rel. World War II, but he was 09 and 1980. So that was that 81, 71, and then here's Grandpa Reynolds, Wesley. He was the one that lived with us for a while until he married That vine, not that vine, anyway, but this was my dad's mother that died in the flu epidemic of 1918. When, if you look at the dates, Dad was 8 years old. And then here's the other twin. Here's Dale and Rail, but Dale and Aunt Grace. Now, when those three boys were born and their mother, Lavina, down here, died in 1918 with the flu epidemic, the oldest two, Uncle Rail and Uncle Dale, they were 9 years old. And then Dad came along, and he was only 6 years old when they died, and Uncle Jack was 4 years old when they lost their mother. And then over the time, Grandpa was an old bachelor for a number of years, just trying to take care of 4 boys that didn't have a mother, and a grandmother that wasn't very attentive to the grandchildren, and they just grew up. Dad said, the 4 of us didn't grow up. We were raised up by the hair of our head. And Grandpa was another, 10 or 15 years before he remarried. And he lived with us, actually, when I was a baby kid, for several years before he remarried and moved away and had their own house there in Circleville. And the great thing about this location here on the east side, if you look up, turn around and show those mountains, is the mountains that we just walked and rode horses and hunted deer and elk and everything else back over here. And it was back on the top of that mountain was the sawmill whereby Dad worked by trading work off of his team of horses, pulling in pine trees to the sawmill, and in return for having those big slabs of wood built to build his house with. And that was all up there. And we as kids, Max and I, there's a little creek called Birch Creek up there. We've walked that place many a time and fished, and over the years we've hunted deer up there and everything else. But this is the very east kind of corner of the main part of Circleville, which lays all across this valley down on this slope down to the river, the Severe River that comes out of, which we saw up by the Wright's house. It comes out of the mouth of the south end of Paiute County and goes out through there. But this old black hill down here was the other area that blocked the access to seeing any of the roads, as well as the one on the south side. And that's why this is called Circleville, Dad said. But this is the old cemetery, and this is where all the 4 brothers were died and with their wives.